All right, I'm going to get us started because it's after time. Thank you all for being here. And I know for a lot of you, you're coming to more than one Zoom this week, so I appreciate that. We have the focus today is on the working with members of Congress and advocacy and building relationships so that you can advocate for the services that you provide and for teens in general. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about thinking more about this project and working with teens and civic engagement and advocacy. So I'm actually going to turn it right over to Megan. And Megan, you're going to tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yes.
Am I right about that? Because I know who you are from our conversations, but I think you would probably do a better job, except that you all know that Megan works at the Washington office for ALA. And Marika is also here from the ALA Washington office, who some of you actually know. And Marika has been working on T3 with us, Transforming Teen Services Train-Trainer approach for however long it's been going on, as well as Ready to Code and other projects. So Megan, thank you for being here.
Yes, no, of course. Thank you all for having me. I'm so excited. If you see my eyes straying this way, it's because I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure that I hit all of my points. So first of all, I'm super excited to be here to talk to you all. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on Capitol Hill right now with the stimulus packages that are being rolled out. So there's a lot of work that we're doing, but this is going to be definitely the highlight of my week. I'm so excited to talk to you all because one of the main reasons why I came to the American Library Association was because of the work that I do with advocacy and what the office does with advocacy. So a little bit of background about me. And I think my story is kind of fun in that I was an English and history major in school. I didn't know anything about politics, and I was really at a loss when it came to anything politics and or policy related. But I had the opportunity to have an internship on Capitol Hill, and it presented me with a challenge. Like, I wanted to learn what it was about. I wanted to know the ins and outs. So I woke up early before my internship, and I watched CNN, I watched C-SPAN, and I had a little note by my TV every morning, and I wrote down all of the words that I didn't understand, like appropriations at the time. And then I had the opportunity to further my skills and work with a congressional office. So I worked with a member of Congress for about 4 years. I worked in the district office in my hometown of El Paso, Texas. And I was the office manager as well as a caseworker in that office. So I worked on casework that was specific to Homeland Security and immigration, as well as doing internship outreach, as well as just the regular office managerial duties. And after that, I had the opportunity to go to DC with the same office and work on legislation there. So it was really exciting. It was so eye-opening, and I really appreciate the insight that it gave me into how to approach advocacy. So after that, I really wanted to become a little bit more of an expert when it came to advocacy, and I saw this opportunity and I thought, this is perfect. I grew up in a library. I found my love for learning in a library. I utilized it throughout all of my personal and professional career. If this is my opportunity to give back, then I'm going to take it. So I've been with the American Library Association now for, gosh, I think it's 3 years already, or 2 years. I can't remember. Time flies. But I'm the Assistant Director of Public Policy and Strategic Initiatives. So what does that mean? Essentially, my job in the office is to help advocates, just like yourselves, understand a little bit better on how to talk to members of Congress and vice versa. So as you probably know, we all speak a very different language that Capitol Hill may not really understand, or they don't understand where we're coming from. And so my job is to help so that way we can be speaking the same language together. And that's a little bit of something that I'll talk in a little bit more, but that's just a little bit of information about me and who I am, and really why I'm here and why I'm passionate about this work, and why this right now, talking to you all, is why I love what it is that I do. So, so that's just a little bit about me and sharing my story. So I'm gonna click check on my list here, shared your story, done. So that's also with that background is just to give you some insight into congressional staffers, who are the majority of the people who you'll be interacting with. So from time to time, I hear from many advocates that, and it's completely fine, in that they're nervous to talk to members of Congress. They're nervous to talk to congressional staff. They see them on the TV and they think, wow, like these are important, influential people. Like I'm a little bit nervous about having that conversation with them. Well, I just wanted to let you all know that they're people too, and they want to hear from you. One of the biggest takeaways that I really hope to stress with all advocates is that every member of Congress, and especially their staff, who are truly the brains in the office when it comes to relationship building, creating legislation, advocating for organizations and for issues, they are not always the subject matter expert when it comes to their particular areas. You all right now, in having your years of expertise and all of your years that you've been working on your issues, you are the subject matter experts when you go into that room, when you talk to those members of Congress, when you talk to their congressional staff. Just to give you some context, when I was a staffer, I had about 5 issue areas. That means that anytime that a bill came up, which were many, or anytime an organization reached out, which at times I had, and I kid you not, between 10 to 20 meetings a day. Oh, sorry, did someone ask a good question? Okay, so I'll continue. So from time to time as a staffer, I would have sometimes between like 10 to 20 meetings a day with a bunch of different organizations that had a bunch of different priorities. I was in no way a subject matter expert when it came to all of the issues that they were presenting to me. So I really leaned on the relationships that I created with the organizations that reached out to me to help to inform me on the bills and or issues that were happening in my community back in El Paso, especially when I was in DC, so that way I had a better pulse on what was going on in the community, and I could better suggest to my member of Congress avenues for correcting issues that we found in the community and or informing him on what was going on in the community. So I just wanted to lead with that and let you all know that the work that you're doing is incredibly important, and know that in the space of advocating and reaching out to any elected official, you all have a huge voice and huge influence, and you deserve to be at that table with that elected official and their staff. So kudos to you all for what you do, and thank you so much for continuing to do it, because I know many times it's a thankless job. So I first want to talk a little bit about, and also if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and then we can address them after as well. I want to talk a little bit about advocacy in the post-COVID world. So we'll touch upon this a little bit. But obviously right now, given the situation that's going on in the world, everyone is reinventing how they are addressing advocacy. And I think one of the biggest things that I want you to take away from this conversation is that the old rules don't necessarily apply to this new post-COVID world. So one-on-one interactions with elected officials and or whomever it may be may look a little different. So we don't have any specific guidelines as to whether elected officials are going to limit the amount of outreach or one-on-one meetings or people in meetings that they have on a given year, but it's going to look a little different. But I would say, I challenge you all that instead of seeing that as a detriment, really look to it as an opportunity to be inventive. So what are ways in this 21st century world can we interact with each other? How have we already interacted with each other, both digitally or really thinking outside the box in that regards? and how can we make inroads to become the movers and shakers of what advocacy will look like. So I think right now, as we're trying to flex our advocacy muscles, let's try to think outside the box on what that could possibly look like. So these Zoom meetings, for example, are a perfect example of that. Even though we've had them before, we rely on them a lot more now. But look, I was able to connect with all of you all in a way that we may not be able to have done with before. So I'm really excited about that opportunity, and I really challenge everyone to think outside the box and not to be afraid to try things that are new. Because if you're, I always say that if you're an agent of change, things hurt a little bit, it's a little bit rough, but that's the only way that we'll be able to become, we'll make progress in this advocacy world. So that's a little bit about that. One thing also to keep in mind, and this situation I think highlights even more so with everyone, how important relationship building is. So let's say, for example, and this only doesn't apply with a member of Congress or an elected official. This applies with anyone that you're advocating for or to. So that could be for an issue, that could be for yourself, that could be for whatever it is. So let's give two scenarios. The first scenario being, let's just say an elected official, because that's kind of what we're discussing here too. Let's say you've never reached out to them before, or you never attended a town hall meeting before. They don't know you. You've never reached out to them. And you have this really great opportunity that you're like, wow, I want to really make sure that I show them what the youth in my library are doing. This is so exciting, and I want them to know what's going on. Well, at this moment, they may not know who you are. And so because of that, and as I just mentioned before, there's so many other groups and organizations and people in the community that are also going for getting some of that attention, or making sure that they bring their issues to light with them as well. But let's say if we've worked on relationship building, and now this is year round, so this is you being a resource to them as well as them being a resource to you. You've practiced this all year round, and now you want to present and move forward. There's this really great, exciting idea that I have. Let me call up Megan from the office of X, Y, and Z. We've had this conversation before. I saw her at a town hall meeting, or they had their town hall here at our library, and I introduced myself and I know who she is. Let me tell her about these great activities that are happening now. Then that conversation flows a lot smoother. So relationship building, especially after all of this COVID situation, is going to be essential. It's going to be incredibly essential. And I think that that's one thing that you can stress, obviously, with your youth as well. Just because they're young does not mean that they don't have a voice. It doesn't mean that they can't advocate. I think that it's incredibly important for them to know that they have the right also to speak their voice with elected officials as well. I have, let's see, I was going to talk a little bit about the structure of congressional offices, and then maybe I'll answer a couple of questions, and then I'll go into what I call is the 6 steps for advocacy, and I'll make sure that I drop those steps in the chat as well. So and please, if you already know this, awesome, but I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same playing field when they know what the differences between congressional offices are. So you have 2 types of congressional offices, and this also applies sometimes to the state and local officials too. Some of them you'll have a DC office and or the state office, and then others you'll have the district office. So for me, for example, we had a district office in El Paso, Texas, and then we had our DC office in Capitol Hill. Some offices or some districts who have large congressional districts will have a couple of congressional offices. So the difference between both offices is that the DC office focuses primarily on legislation or items that are more policy related. Now, that does not mean that they don't pay attention to what's going on in their constituency. It is incredibly important for them to mold their legislation and their policy around what is going on in their congressional districts. So the other form of office is obviously a district office. Now, what they have, or what their responsibilities are primarily, are casework related and or to keep a pulse on what's going on in the congressional district. So if you invite a member of Congress to go to an event, and let's say, for example, they're not able to attend, but one of their staff members does, that's part of their role, is to make sure that they know what's going on in their congressional district, to know what the issues are, to know where the assets are in that district, and then to relay that obviously to the congressional office in DC as well. Now, I was first a district office. I was a district staffer, so I have a little bit of bias when it comes to what offices are cooler. They're all cool, but I love the district office. And the reason why is because you are in that constituency. You have a pulse on what is happening in that community. So the relationships that you build with your district office are incredibly important. Now, just because a DC office is in DC does not mean that they're any way more important. So let me give you a perfect example. When I was in my congressional district, we were on the US-Mexico border. So immigration is a very big issue for us. And as I mentioned, I worked on casework that was related to Homeland Security and immigration. We had a constituent that came in, and he wanted to marry this woman who was a Mexican national. Now, to no fault of her own, when she was 2 years old, her family brought her over the US-Mexico border and claimed false citizenship for her. Now, she was 2. Now, the way that the law is written at this moment is that because she claimed false citizenship, she is no longer able to enter the US. And so that was, first of all, very jarring for our office. We were like, whoa, this is crazy. And so because of that person who advocated for himself, who advocated for his wife or his future wife, we were able to be informed about this issue in law. And because it was an issue that my member of Congress was passionate about, we were able to then take what was happening in our constituency, go out to other constituencies and try to see, is this something that's happening across the board? We partnered with organizations that were passionate about these issues as well. And then we took that to our DC office. They turned it around and they tried to write some legislation that would address this issue. So that's just to highlight a little bit how the pipeline between the district office and communities really helped to inform policy. Now, although that bill wasn't able to pass, we introduced it every year. We maintained that relationship with our congressional, with that constituent in the district, and we were able to tell that story. So really, advocacy comes down to storytelling. And that's something that I'll explain a little bit more later before I go into the 6 steps for advocacy. So, Marika, I think you were answering a couple of questions. Are there any questions that I should address right now before we move to the next section?
You could probably add to it, Megan, because you're much more knowledgeable about the district versus the DC office, but I think the benefits of going to the district office. I was thinking, like, when Jamie Raskin, who is from Maryland, his staff person came to our fly-in days, and she was talking about just how approachable the district office is, and that, you know, they live and work in where you are and all of that kind of thing. But anyway, thinking about approaching them or connecting with them and building that relationship maybe is, and how that's different than building the relationship with DC staff.
Yeah, that's perfect. So it's incredibly important to build your relationship with your district office, again, because they're in your district. And my district director was awesome. She was so cool. And she would give reports every week to the member of Congress, and a lot of times every day when there was like a hot ticket item going on in the district. This is what's important to your district. Because a lot of times these members of Congress, a large part of their time in office is actually away from the district, okay? And I want also to note that is because they have to be in DC to vote on legislation that will affect their district. So if they're disconnected, if they are in DC, who's the person that's going to be reminding them of what's going on in the district? That's going to be their district director, their district staffers. That's going to be the casework that they're seeing that's coming in. That's also going to be the policy staff who has been continually talking and keeping in touch with what's going on in the district. So maintaining a relationship with your congressional district staffer is of vital importance. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that you reach out to them and say only when we need something, and say, hey, I need to let you know that we need something now, here we go. And because, you know, they're really busy and you don't want to bother them. Well, it's their job. It's their job to know what's going on in the district. And I think especially as library workers, there are so many resources that you give to the community that they have no idea about. And they will only know if you let them, if you have that one-on-one conversation, or even if you can just send them a list of resources that are happening. I'll give you a perfect example of my district. Again, this goes back to immigration. So I was an immigration caseworker. When people came to our office, it was the end of the line for them. They needed help. They needed assistance. But because we were a congressional office, we couldn't fill out their immigration paperwork for them. And so we had to turn them away at the door. So unless there's some very limitations to what we as a congressional staff would do, I wanted to be able to help. And it would kill me to not be able to help them and say, let me fill out your paperwork for you because I've done the training, I know how to do it. But we can't, because a congressional office has limitations. Little did I know that my library, literally next door to our congressional office, had they partnered with the Department of Justice, and they have this program where they had people, I believe it's deputized, so that they can help constituents out fill out that immigration casework or the immigration paperwork. We didn't know about that. And if someone had reached out to us, I guarantee you that we would have been able to refer so many of our constituents that way. So you all have so many resources that address the issues that are going on in your community, or assistance that you can give to congressional offices. And it's all about having a two-way street. So don't only go to them when you want to let them know of something that's immediate and something that you need now. You have so many resources and even space. A lot of these offices need to host town hall meetings. Where are they going to host them other than an area where people go to seek information about their community? So I think that's just really important to know, that building those relationships is of vital importance too.
I have a question, but I want to see if anybody else does first. So I think the building the relationship piece is hard though to get started, and this might be in your tips, but like when in some of the projects we work on, we talk about not going and saying, here, I've got this for you, but actually having a conversation and starting that conversation. Mm-hmm. And because, well, it's awesome what you're saying about the resources, but I sometimes wonder is like, here's all these resources, and yeah, that sounds good, doesn't build the relationship. You know what I mean? I'm having a hard time articulating this.
I think a great thing is there's always just picking up your phone and giving them a call, letting them know. I think I'm huge on inviting them to events. So there are plenty of events that are going on in the library from time to time. Now, inviting a staffer or a member to come to your library for a tour is great. And that's something that we stress with every single library advocate out there. But I think it's also very different, and it's a very different opportunity for them to see some of the services that you provide firsthand. If there's an event that's going on, or if there's a program that's going on, or if let's say, for example, you had like a youth coding event at your library, and let's say invite a staffer to go, invite a staffer to participate. If not, how about sending them a one-pager of the findings, or sending them a video of the findings throughout that event, and saying, this is something that happens in my library. We're super excited about this. And again, this is where the research component, which we'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes, comes into it. So let's say, for example, you're a member of Congress. Through some research, you find out that he or she is interested in technology. They love STEM, or they love anything that's related to making, for example. Now, what if you had an activity that's going on in your library that addresses that? There's, like I said, a coding activity, or there's a makerspace activity. and you invite them to come. We've had many situations where we've reached out to congressional offices after doing some research, fully knowing that they are interested in those specific areas. And guess what? They came to our events. For example, we had one member of Congress who, we had an event on Capitol Hill. We partnered with DC Public Library, and we brought an actual 3D printer into the library. We invited congressional staff and members to come, and this one staffer came, and I'll never forget her face. She was looking around and she's like, how did I not know that this was in my is this in every library? And I said, well, it's not in every library. However, it is in some. And so how about we connect? Let me help to connect you with your local library, and let's see what kind of services that are related to STEM are there in your library. That congressional staffer, well, that conversation and connection led to the staffer going and their district office going to a couple of libraries. And even more than that, the member of Congress then got excited and decided to go to congressional offices, or I'm sorry, to the libraries as well. And not only did they go to the one that was the one that we connected them with, they went to 3. And I think that's a really great opportunity, again, to engage elected officials and their staffers in a different way, and to begin the process of having that conversation with them that leads into relationship building. We also have on our ALA website, public policy and advocacy section, we have a month-by-month resource, and I can't remember exactly if it's updated as of yet after all of this, but what we try to do is give everyone action items for every month. Have you invited your elected official to do this? Have you sent them a one-pager about what you're doing now? So things of that nature, I think, would be really great for them to hear about, and it'll kind of create an organic dialogue that you can have with that office. Is there any other questions?
Just some great conversation.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you, Megan.
Right, perfect. Good. I'm glad. So I'm gonna drop it's funny, Marika and I were talking about these 6 steps for advocacy. This is something that I've come up with, and it's kind of how I approach my advocacy as well, but I'm gonna drop it with you all. And the spacing of it does not look really good, but let's see. So pardon me if it looks a little wonky. Yeah, sorry about that. But I'm gonna go over these steps. So this is my 6 steps for advocacy. And I think as this is important to note, or it's important to note first and foremost, that these steps don't just apply for members of Congress, elected officials. This applies for everything, for you advocating for yourself, for youth advocating for something that they're passionate about. These steps and these skills apply to that too. And that's why I'm so excited about this project as well, because I think it's so vitally important for especially youth to know also that their voice is incredibly important, that if they want to advocate for something that they believe in, they are fully within their right to be able to do that. And if they want to reach out to a member of Congress, they should, because they are a constituent of that district. Whether they be a voter, whether they're not of age to vote, it doesn't matter. If that issue is important to that constituent in that congressional district, it should be important to that member of Congress as well. So we'll go over these six steps for advocacy. So the first is, what are youth passionate about? And so this is in the context of you all trying to figure out what these youth are interested in and how you can help to bridge the gap between them reaching out to an elected official or a member of Congress or something like that. So let me just move over here with my other little notes because I have a little bit more. Okay, so step one is, what are youth passionate about and why? So this is where their story comes into play. It is incredibly important. As I mentioned, advocacy is storytelling. That's really what it is. And so it is so incredibly important for those advocates, those youth, to know why they're passionate about what they're passionate for. So if they say, for example, well, I really am passionate about making sure that bullies are nice, or make sure that bullies are nicer to people. It's like, that's great, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. First of all, because that's probably going to be a lot for them to share that, but also get to the root of it. Like, so why is it? Why are you passionate about that? Why is it something that you care about? Because there's a story there, and that story is key for making sure that people understand where they're coming from, and also serves as the foundation of their advocacy as well. Why are they passionate about that, and how can they portray that to someone else? So storytelling is key. That's something that we try to stress with all of our advocates, but just keep that in mind. So number one is, what are they passionate about, and what is their story? So step number two is, how does their story connect with the community at large? Now, this is where you as facilitators will be able to help them a lot, because especially when you're reaching out to an elected official, a member of Congress, it's again that component of talking in the same language. They need to know why this youth that's telling them about something that they're passionate about, is this something that affects the community at large? So let's say, for example, the youth is passionate about mental health. So you get down to the root of their story, and you find out that someone that they're very close to, a mentor, a parent figure, what have you, may be suffering from, let's say, PTSD. You find out that that person was a veteran, or had something traumatic that happened in their past. So is this something that's happening in the larger community? And then also creating that connection between what that youth is passionate about and something that's larger, that's another issue. What's going on in the community? And how could that youth see themselves and impassion themselves as being a voice for others that may not be able to speak for themselves? And allow them to know that they are speaking for others who can't. And so that's creating, so they're getting the story, and then they're creating it, connecting it to the community at large. And this component is going to be very important, because when you present that to an elected official, they're going to want to know the whole picture as well. And it'll help make an advocacy story so much stronger too. So step number three is, where does the elected official stand on this issue? So this will help with the approach of messaging. What is that elected official passionate about? And how can you relay the thing that the youth is passionate about to issues that the elected is passionate about? So let's say, for example, this youth is passionate about mental health within the same context that we talked about before. So throughout some research, and you as a facilitator would be able to help with this as well, or help train them to conduct some of this research. You find out that this elected official is on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Let's say even further, they're on the subcommittee for mental health. So that is a great platform for that advocate, that youth advocate, to be able to have a conversation with an elected official and meet them where they're at. You're passionate about mental health, Mr. or Mrs. Congressman or Congresswoman. Guess what? I'm passionate about it as well. I know, I've done my research. You care about this issue, and so do I. So let me tell you my story. I think that type of approach to conversation will go a long way, as opposed to saying, I'm here to tell you about what I care about, and here it is. Do you see where the dynamic is a little different? It's a conversation instead of being talked at or talked to. Step number 4 is figuring out how both issues are aligned. So that's that component again. If the elected official cares about mental health and Veterans Affairs or what have you, then that's where you can help to structure an argument, or not an argument, but information and a story. You are passionate about this issue. I am passionate about this other issue. So let's have a conversation in the same language. So this is my bread and butter of my job. This is what I love so much, because you can have a member of Congress who doesn't get it. And then when you put in their context and their language, all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. How do we not know about that? And let me give you a perfect example of something that we came across. our advocacy, there was this one member of Congress who never signed onto any of our bills before, and had never been really outright supportive. So maybe behind the scenes is supportive, of course, but never on paper, never have explained that to us. And so after talking to some of the libraries in his district, they're like, I don't know if he aligns with us. Like, I'm not sure. And I'm like, okay, well, let's try to approach this in a different way. What does he care about? So we found out that he's on the Committee of Homeland Security, the Subcommittee of Emergency Preparedness. So it come to find out that during Hurricane Sandy, his community was affected. We did a little bit more digging, and we found out that, guess what? The library in his district was the first public building to open after Hurricane Sandy. It was the first place that people could go to seek assistance in the recovery after Hurricane Sandy. So when we approached his office, we didn't say, like, we're here and we have a bunch of services. The way that we approached it was, you care about emergency preparedness. Guess what? We have a bill that in the bill, it talks about libraries and emergency preparedness in libraries. Did you know that our libraries responded to Hurricane Sandy in X, Y, and Z? And this is the value that we bring to your community. Let's now have a conversation about why we're important and why now we're speaking the same language. So I think it's incredibly important also to know that there is a way that you can approach every conversation by doing a little bit of research. So I think that was step 4, how our issues align. Okay, so step 5 is lead with the story. Is to lead with your story. So keep in mind the interest of the office. How can a story connect both interests and outreach for the offices? So again, that's the whole idea of, I know my story. My story is that here at our libraries, we responded to you all or to our community when we needed to, when there was a situation that was dire and we had to respond to our community, because that's what we do, right? So when we led with that story, in that conversation, it would be like, Mr. or Mrs. Member of Congress, we responded to issues in our community in this way. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. And then also keeping in mind their interests. Now you know a little bit about me. Let's turn it around and let's have a conversation. Can I know a little bit about you? What's your library story? Everyone has a library story. Have you ever been into your library? If not, let's get you in there, you know, or what are you interested in? And how can we connect on that level? So leading with your story is incredibly important, and even more so, getting to know the person on the opposite end of the table, get to know them as a person. I've seen many advocates that have gone into meetings and they have their script of their ask, and they say, you must ask, the ask is X, Y, and Z. And so people go in and they say, okay, hi, my name is Megan and I am here from the American Library Association. I want to tell you that my ask is X, Y, and Z. That doesn't really work sometimes, you know? Sometimes an office could really see that as being like, oh, that's great. So what are we going to talk about for the next 15 minutes, you know? And so I think a great approach that you can have, and something that you can stress with your younger advocates as well as yourself, is going in to a conversation and saying, my name is Megan, I'm an advocate, I love libraries. Can I ask you, what is your library story? I feel like everyone has one. Let's have a conversation about that. Where are they coming from? Are they coming from that they still think that libraries are just houses for books? If that's it, then that's a perfect opportunity to inform them and then to have a more meaningful conversation. Well, did you know that they actually do this? Did you actually know that they do that? And let me give you a little bit of a tip whenever you approach, or if someone asks you or brings up, well, you know, libraries are kind of obsolete, aren't they? That's my favorite question. That's my favorite question for people to ask, or for staff to ask in a meeting or what have you. And my answer to them is, well, you know, libraries have been around for forever. And I always say the thing of, you know, clay tablets, right? Well, they had to house them somewhere. You know, the Library of Alexandria? Yeah, it's not here anymore, but guess what? Libraries are still here. And they're going to always be transforming. And this is how a library has gone from that, and from what you may know as being a house for books, this is what it is now. And then you can go into your story. And so I'll end with step number 6. So end with a thank you, and then with the ask. So again, I'm here from Library XYZ. My ask is for you to do this. So after you've already told them all of your story, you've connected with them on a personal level, then you go in and you say, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your advocacy. Thank you so much for doing your job. Not doing your job like that, but thank you so much for doing a job that's really tough. Because believe me, as a public servant, and as you all know, sometimes it's a very, very much a thankless job, and it's a little hard. So going in and just thanking them for what they're doing, I think will go a long way. You've heard my story. Now, here is my ask. That pivot will always really help. So when it comes to activities that you can have and do with your youth, there are a bunch of different things that you can think outside the box. So obviously there's writing a letter to an elected official. That's probably the easiest thing that you can have them do. Why are they passionate about something? Tell them to write down their story. Ask them to write questions to their elected official. I remember as a legislative correspondent, one of my responsibilities in the DC office was to respond to every single congressional letter that came into our office. And I had to do that within 4 weeks. I'll tell you that we got around 4,000 letters every single week. So they were tough, and volume is incredibly important when it comes to advocacy. Believe me, it really, really is. Especially when we send out like action alerts, that means that the timing for that action alert equals attention in a congressional inbox, which is incredibly important. That I, as a staffer in the Hill, saw every single letter that came in. But let me tell you what happens to personal letters. So the systems that Hill staff have now are very sophisticated. So if you send a standard letter that the system recognizes is the same language, that has been submitted 3 or 4 times, it will get grouped within the Hill systems. And what you'll be able to do is assign it to like a folder that's put off to the side that helps to categorize so that me as a staffer, I can address the letters in a timely way. But if you write a personal letter, the system doesn't recognize it as a standard template letter. So what that means is that it's booted out of that system and not put in that folder immediately. So I, as a staffer, have to go in and personally read what that letter says. And I have to figure out, okay, well, what is the best course of action for this? Now, I'll tell you that those letters, as a staffer's perspective, are so hard to answer because I'm trying to make sure that I address all of your concerns. And with the standard letter, it's great because I can collect all of those, tell my member of Congress, hey, member, we got 35 messages about libraries advocating for X, Y, and Z. It's important to the congressional district this week. And that I can do super easy. What's the hardest part is if I have a constituent reaching out to me and saying, I'm passionate about this. This is my personal story. I have questions for you. Can you please answer those questions for me? That's incredibly important. And that's super hard as a staffer because it's like, oh man, now I have to go make sure I do all this research and stuff, which is actually really good because then your issue is on the top of their mind. And that trickles into all of the office, the rest of the legislative office as well as the district office to be like, okay, I have this member or have this constituent who's interested in X, Y, and Z. They have questions for me. Now, every office is different. Some will be a little bit better at responses, some won't be, but genuinely they want to hear what's going on. So asking those questions in a really organic way is going to be super, super helpful. Marika and I and Linda actually were talking a little bit too about like what are outside the box opportunities that youth can really flex their advocacy muscles. And especially now in post-COVID world, it's incredibly important to think outside the box. These youth now are so creative. There are so many mediums on how they communicate with each other as well as how skills that they will know that I will never know. And I think what's great is really for them to be able to tap into what that is. Is that making a video? Is that making a short video? My brother is a photographer and he produces some of these, and videographers, and he produces some of these just amazing short clip videos that I personally relate to, and I think, wow, these are so awesome. And I know that if we put advocacy within that same context, maybe a staffer will pay attention. Maybe a staffer will see that specific advocacy and outreach, and it would be significantly different than anything else that they've seen before. So I would say I really challenge youth to flex their muscles and to think outside the box on what does advocacy look like now. It could always be the traditional form. Reach out to your elected official, write to your elected official, have a conversation with them, build a relationship, but what else is out there? What else can you do? So I think that's really important and something that we all can really tap into as well, on some great ideas that they may have. So I've talked a lot and I need a drink of water. So everyone, please let me know if you have any questions, or if Linda or Marika, if I missed anything, just let me know too.
First questions. People have questions, thoughts, stories. Stories are important.
I'm going to share also some resources that ALA has. It's on our Getting Started page. And there's some resources on how to conduct a meeting, how to write an op-ed. You have something that's really cool that's happening, write an op-ed about it. Share it with your local paper, share it with your elected officials. I saw a video the other day, I think it was the library director of Fort Worth Public Library, Manya Shore. She shared with me this video that her local newscast, they highlighted that library because they thought that it was so great. I think maybe the news people forgot that libraries already provided all these amazing things, but Manya presented it in such an interesting way that her library story was able to be shared with everyone in the Fort Worth area. And I thought that was awesome. And that's because she reached out to this newscast, and they were able to like share ideas, or maybe they reached out to her, I'm not sure. But really think outside the box when it comes to that. And we have some resources that are available to you about writing letters to the op-ed. What does a congressional visit look like? What are best practices? We have an awesome video that Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton helped to put together. She's a guest speaker on that video, and she kind of gives some perspective on why congressional visits are so important, meaning visits to your libraries are important. So all those resources are available on our website too.
So let's, because we have about 10 minutes, and maybe talk a little bit more about next steps with teens and things we might do. So Megan and Marika and I talked about having another session with Megan where you would bring teens. We would have a time and a Zoom link for teens, and Megan would talk about her experience working in a district office, and also then thinking about how teens could do some of what we're talking about. And it seems to me, I could be totally wrong, that idea of all of this could look different now, and how we engage and getting teens thinking about that could be really awesome. Getting teens talking about the problems in the community and aligning that with the work of the Congress members and district office staff could be pretty awesome. But what are people thinking about moving forward, bringing teens into this, building civic engagement? Oh, and the other thing I was going to say is, it also seems like something we could start virtually, and then people could go off, even if not every teen has access at this point. It's something that maybe could start this way and could build out in communities. But I could, like I said, I could be wrong. What do people think?
I'm probably just like overly excited right now, but I think so many teens right now would love to feel like they're making a difference and advocating for the library. I call them my League of Extraordinary Teens, or LET, because I didn't like Teen Advisory Board, TAB. We crushed a thing of TAB on our first meeting. Have been emailing me and saying, well, can we do this? Can we do this? One of my teens took her research class for school and made it about library access for detention center teens, because she knows that's my thing and now it's her thing. But they keep asking for, how can I help? And this might be a really good way to say you can help by advocating for yourself.
That's actually awesome. That's so cool. I also worked on Federal Bureau of Prison cases. So that's something that's near and dear to my heart as well. And it's so interesting. I mean, I think that community is incredibly important to be advocated for, just personally. But I think that that's really great. And if that's something that she or them, they all are passionate about, like tapping into what it is that makes them passionate for that. Now, I think something that would allow teens to feel like they're working towards something too is maybe for them, that component of finding out how that story connects to your community. Maybe that's something that they can do too. How maybe a lot of these teens already have what they're passionate about, but maybe the next step is trying to figure out, how does this connect with your community or the larger community, and letting them know that your voice is important to that as well. And I think making that connection, and Marika and I were talking a little bit, and Linda too, about this the other day, is that a lot of advocacy at times, it seems like it's one level. Do something, say something, click something, and you're done. What makes a good advocate and what makes a great advocate is the next step. How does this connect with your larger community, and how can you serve as an advocate for them? So for example, right now, we're trying to advocate for the next step in the stimulus bill. So we in our office are doing a lot, and it's incredibly humbling for me. I think I took a step back from just sending all the emails and going through the motions, and it took a step back, and I realized us doing our work that we do every day is a symbol of hope. Like, we advocate for others who can't have this access to members of Congress, right? Like, everyone does. But my job is to make sure that they pay attention to us because we're important. So I think it's incredibly humbling to know that I, as an advocate, have that ability. And I think allowing teens to know that too, and make that connection to the community at large, is incredibly important. So even the library world is large. If they're passionate about the library, then why are they passionate about the library? What is it about the library that makes them impassioned?
Other thoughts about doing this? So I guess one thing is, like, one of the things Megan and Marika and I talked about is asking after this, we would send out an email and say, are you interested? Yeah, Marika, that learning loss thing. I don't mean that like, but sending out an email to people and saying, are you interested in this next step? And then setting something up with any of you who are interested in bringing teens into this conversation. It's not necessary, and then thinking from that, what might we do to support this work with teens and civic engagement and communities? And Marika and I have been chatting separately about, this is all connected learning. So as a part of all of the projects you're involved in, because we have 3 different projects here, this is all connected learning. And so building those skills with youth, I think, makes a huge difference. Jennifer in Pennsylvania says, count me in. Awesome. But others, oh, wow.
I know. Linda,
Yeah.
Oh, the hotspot things. Yeah. Sharon, where are you from?
New Jersey,
Library. New Jersey. Oh, okay.
State Library.
I can unmute myself. Yeah, New
The
Jersey.
coach,
Library.
Sharon.
Somehow your name was familiar, but that's good. I might follow up with you just on that hotspot thing. One thing that we talked about too, Linda, which I'm going to put a pitch in for, is that you heard, if you didn't already know, how important stories are. And so for Megan and for me to be able to be successful with members of Congress, even though we're not necessarily talking about our own districts, we're talking about whatever district who is going to sign the letter to get IMLS money or whatever, but we need stories from those districts. So our ask of you all is, if you're engaged in this with your teens especially, but just you also, is we were talking, Linda, about somehow to gather the stories and the experiences of what goes on. So, you know, what are the kids interested in and how does it go is one side of it, because I think we would love to know that as well. But also, if they connect with a district staff person and tell that story, for us to be able to reinforce whatever goes on and just have information about that piece would be really important for us as well. So somebody said something about the LGBTQ youth, I think I saw. Yeah. So, you know, if we have, oh, we went and met with district so-and-so and we told the story and then they followed up, and then we can follow up. Or if we ever need a story in that district, we put it into our bank. Ideally we do when we're organized, to go back to at a later date, right? So we have the name of the library and where this happened and what you all facilitated. So that's really
Monica,
important.
does that follow through if a staffer comes to an event and interacts with the teens? Does that follow through as a, it's not exactly a story, but it's a connection?
I think so, right, Megan? Like, we want to know when a member visits a library.
Definitely.
And we can say, like, oh, during appropriation season, oh, we remember when your boss was at the library and they experienced X, Y, and Z, and you know, so now we hope you'll sign our letter.
Yeah, exactly. And then also we can elevate that hopefully on social media too, because they're paying attention to social media, very much so. They care about how they look on the internet too. And so if there's something great that's happening, you have it an image or something and they put it up on their social media, then we can also try to elevate that. But yes, the stories are incredibly important, because when we go back to them, there'll be offices that are like, okay, well, you know, well, why do we have to sign on to this letter again? We have 20 other letters that we have to sign on to. And then that's when we're able to go and say, well, remember when you visited that library? Remember when you loved it? Well, this helps to support that. So I think it helps out a lot. It helps us a lot for sure.
Thank you.
So
and, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm reading Renee's thing. That's great, Renee. So PLA is collecting, and we are too, but PLA is also collecting like how libraries are responding right now, especially for people who don't have access, which is the hard one. Like if you do virtual services and you have patrons who have an internet connection, that's fairly easy, but how do you connect with people who don't have access? So calling and everything, it's really great.
Well, and Marika, your comment, both the hotspots and the lost learning, those are also topics that are community oriented, that teams with their district staff and members of Congress could look at and talk about alignment. So I think those are really great examples of that. We are just about out of time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including Megan and Marika, who, if you haven't noticed, like there's all this stuff going on in Washington right now, and they have spent some time with us. So I really appreciate that, because I know how busy and all you are working on to help libraries move forward. So thank you, Megan and Marika, for being here. We'll talk about a step and a team. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you were frozen, but you're okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a teen session. I'll be back in touch with everyone for that. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I've learned an amazing amount. So I will see some of you tomorrow and some of you in a week or so, and I'll talk to Megan and Marika very soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Take
y'all.
care.
Thanks for what you're doing.